Hello guys, this is Nolopada. In today's No Man's Sky video, we will be talking about inventory management. Let's be honest here, this game is not known for its easy to use inventory. But honestly, I've played great games that have even more aggravating systems. I'm looking at you, Subnautica.
What is that? What the f*** is that?
But these tips I have for you today will help you out immensely. I know they've helped me out, and believe it or not, you'll end up with some empty inventory slots for you to be able to collect more things. No Man's Sky is a game that has 18 quintillion planets. This game is full of things that you can collect, you can sort, and you can craft into other things. But that also leads you to having your inventory full all the time. Especially if you're like me. You'll end up keeping everything like a hoarder on the TLC channel. I try not to throw away anything, just in case I need it to craft something, or they add a use for it in a future update. Anyways, to begin, my first piece of advice is to not keep everything, especially when you're starting out. When you start out, you don't have any inventory. You have a small suit inventory, a small ship inventory. So I would recommend throwing things out that you have no use for. Eventually, you'll learn what is useful to sell, what's useful to keep, and what's useful to just delete. You can delete things by holding down the middle mouse button on PC or hold down the right stick on your controller. If it's a food item, at least at first, I would recommend just eating it. You could press E on PC, the square button on PlayStation, and the X button on Xbox to consume these amazing foods that you can find. Most of these will give you a small buff to your life support power or your hazard protection. So at the end of the day, you end up benefiting instead of just throwing it out. My next tip is to click on this Jason Plays video above. Of course, after you watch this one, you don't want to leave my video just yet. This will help you to expand your suit inventory in a very quick way. I want to add a small tip that he might not have mentioned in his video, and it is that every system that you've already been to is saved on your teleporter in the space station. Check those. If you haven't gotten the storage slots from those stations, do that first before you start warping all over the place and wasting fuel. Your suit is your main inventory. It has general and cargo, but the general is the one you kind of want to focus on most at first, because every time you talk with an NPC, sometimes it'll lock you out of certain dialogues because it wants to offer you something, but since it's full, you cannot. So it's very important to have free space in your main inventory. The following are some elements that I recommend you keeping on your general inventory if possible. Pugnium, carbon, condensed carbon, oxygen, sand, which is silicate powder, whatever the heck they call it, sodium, mordite, dihydrogen, ferrite, dust, purified and magnetized. Why?
Why?
Because you're going to need these elements to survive. Or you'll get these elements when you're exploring, shooting sentinels, mining. It's good to have these slots reserved. By having these items in these slots, it makes sure that you always have room for them. So even if your inventory is capped up to the top, you can still burn down that tree and get that carbon, or you can still get that roadkill when you run over this animal with your lifted Ford Focus. If you notice, all of these that I just mentioned are raw materials. Why? The cargo slots are better used for individual items because the stacks for items is doubled on the cargo, but the stacks for materials stays at 999 regardless of if it's in the general or the cargo. So that's why I recommend keeping the elements in the general and use that cargo for the items that benefit the most from being in there. Here are a few recommendations of things that I usually keep in my cargo inventory. Batteries, life support gel, navigation data, wiring looms, and all the different maps that you can find. Keep in mind that at first you're not going to have a lot of cargo space, but this is for when you do have that space. I recommend keeping these items here. Next tip, your ship is also a good way to have some extra storage starting out. Keep in mind that ships also have general and cargo slots. This is what I personally keep in my ships. Silver, gold, platinum.
Otto, what do you want?
A precious tritium.
And warp cells. These are all elements that you're going to need to either refuel your ship or that you're going to get from blowing up asteroids. So I recommend keeping these stacks so even when your ship is full, you can still collect these items. Another thing I recommend is move your technology to your technology tab on your suit and your ship. Pressing square on your PlayStation, X on your Xbox, E on PC allows you to move them. Notice that I kind of shuffled these technologies around, and the reason for that is you want to keep the same types of technologies together for more bonuses. But that's a whole nother video. My recommendation early game is to buy cheaper and uglier ships. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to have the Lamborghini of the ships, but sometimes you have to start out with that 99 Honda Accord. It's a little more affordable and it'll get you a lot more space quicker. Keep in mind, you could have up to 9 ships, so if you find a bunch of cheap ones, just buy a bunch of cheap ones and you can call them to your location whenever you want. And that brings up the next point. Ships are good, but their one limitation is that you have to be very close by to them to call materials to and from it. You can install a little technology to make it a little bit further away, but it's still way too close to the ship. I recommend developers, please expand this somehow, add some more advanced technology, because it's kind of a pain to have to call your ship when you have to get that one item. I used to have a combination of a bunch of ships and the base storages that you can have for my items, but it got so tedious to have to look for that one item or call in, which ship did I keep that in? Oh crap. You'd have to sort every single thing. So my next tip will save you from all of this hassle. My next tip is freighters. Freighters, they just have one storage. No, freighters can be installed with freighter rooms. Freighter rooms sync with the same storages that you can keep on your base. But you know what the awesome part is? You don't have to be at your base to use these storages. You can call your freighter in from anywhere and boom, you'll have your stuff there. You can summon any item in these freighter rooms as long as you have the matter beam installed. These can be unlocked in the freighter. There's this little terminal, you can unlock it. It's not too hard to do, and this will change your game for the better, I promise you. And the best part is you don't use your quick menu to take stuff to it, which you might think that's not that good, but if you use your freighter main storage as a halfway point, you can send everything that you want to sort in the future to your freighter. Boom, boom, boom. You're on planet, you send it up to your freighter. And whenever you get the chance, you just open your freighter menu and you can sort everything out into their appropriate rooms. And those rooms can even be named. So what's not to love about freighters? If you look here in this clip, I am storing all the metal plating that I bought because I was going to build a bunch of mining operations, but I had other plans. So here you see how I can condense like 50 stacks of this metal into a lot fewer stacks because these freighter rooms have bigger stacks too. It's a really good idea. Freighters can be expensive. They're up in the ballpark of 100 million credits. But don't be afraid of this price because No Man's Sky gives you a free freighter when you're just starting out. As soon as you warp a few times, you'll see a battle and you save this freighter from that battle and you'll get it for free. So my number one recommendation is get your freighter, get your matter beam, and get these storage slots because it will make your No Man's Sky journey a million times better. I used to use the base storages all the time, but I no longer do so. And the main reason is because when you're using your quick transfer menu and you send, let's say, 5 carbon, instead of putting it in the storage container that has carbon, it will just put it in the first empty slot in any of the storages. So that is not a good feature. Also, Hello Games, please fix this. If so, I would use these a lot more, but at this point, it's easier just to use the freighter storages. And if you're in your base and you want to use your normal storages, that's fine too. Remember, they're the same storage, they sync up. It's just a lot easier to use the freighter. Another tip I can give when it comes to items is that some items can be broken down into other items. For example, there are things called geodes and tritium hyperclusters. You can break them down. Most of the time they'll give you either ferrite or tritium, but sometimes they'll give you some better loot, so it's good to break them down. That way you just empty out that slot that it's taking up. Another item that can be broken down is the salvaged glass that you get from fighting sentinels. You can either keep a stack of them, just like to have a slot for them, but I usually just break them down. That way you can get whatever upgrades or whatever nanites or whatever you're going to get as loot. And in this case, you can see me installing some of these upgrades that I got, comparing to the ones I already have, and storing the rest because honestly, you don't always have time to install all this technology, so I store it for a later date. This is my final tip, and it might sound like a joke, but just make some beef jerky.
Beef jerky time.
When you are slaughtering these innocent creatures, you're going to get a bunch of different types of meat. They're all the same thing, but there's meat from a cat, and there's meat from crab creatures, and there's meat from Scrat from Ice Age. I'm not kidding you, there is Scrat. You will find it eventually if you keep playing. Not a joke. Anywho, when you kill all these creatures, you want to get the meats and cook them. The game gives you a certain constructible thing that is called a nutrient processor. You want to put the meat in this nutrient processor. What that does, it turns all these different stacks into one stack of beef jerky, as I like to call it. But it's really technically called processed meat. And what you want to do with this is either store it. There's some good storage in these cooking things that they all sync up to one storage. Or you can even put 2 beef jerkies in a row and make something called mystery meat stew. This stew is worth a good amount of units, but it's more useful to take to Cronus. I believe that's what his name is. He will give you nanites. If you have a lot of time on your hands, you can go to this man and he will tell you if he likes your food, and he will give you nanites.
2 hours later.
You do seriously surprise me.
Thank you, Chef. I was hoping you'd see that. I mean, I'd give it all I got. Give you 110.
You surprise me to how shit you are.
As a final word of advice, I keep a few of these cookers on my freighter at all times because you never know when you want to pull a few down. It's better to keep them up there because I don't use them all the time. So I keep them up in the freighter. Whenever I need to cook something, I just place them down. As long as the freighter's there, they'll place down, and you can cook all this stuff for this wonderful, wonderful man. Or alien, whatever you want to call him. And that is the end of this video. It took a little while longer than my previous video, but that's because I wanted to experiment a little bit with, the editing, a few cutaway gags. I hope you guys liked it. If you like this content, please share it to people who play No Man's Sky. If this helped you out personally, leave a comment and leave a like, subscribe, hit the little bell because I know I subscribe to a lot of people on YouTube, but I barely know when they upload unless I hit that little bell. So if you like my content, hit that bell as well. This is Nolopada, and this has been No Man's Sky.